good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today as we explore a variety of ways to transform spreadsheets into EAD. Please note this webinar is being recorded. Do you list out your components on a spreadsheet before committing the item records into ArchivesSpace? If this is your preferred processing workflow, you're not alone. In this webinar, we will look at 3 distinct methods to get your spreadsheet rows and columns into your ArchivesSpace resource record to populate components. First, we'll have Elizabeth Perkes, who will demonstrate a workflow that uses built-in Microsoft Office tools to convert Microsoft Excel spreadsheets to EAD via mail merge. Next, we'll have Jason Ronallo, who will provide a demo of the Stead schema and Stead tool, which he developed, which is a command line tool and web application that uses Ruby to transform data in spreadsheets into EAD component levels. And we'll have Ben Johnson, who uses a spreadsheet importer plugin developed by Bobbi Fox at Harvard University in a variety of ways. However, he will provide an overview of one simple use of the tool, how to easily and quickly add bulk data from new accessions to existing resources. But perhaps you would like to see more than just workflows. Kelly Spring will provide insight into some of the common troubleshooting and some other tasks that will help you successfully upload the EAD into ArchivesSpace. Presenting today, we have Elizabeth Perkes. Elizabeth has worked for the Utah State Archives for almost 28 years. In that capacity, she has primarily managed their database systems, websites, and electronic records. In 2000, she converted all of their finding aids to EAD. The general methodology used in that project became a small how-to video in 2008, which is being updated and described today. Jason Ronallo is a department head of digital library initiatives at the North Carolina State University Libraries. His current interests include IIIF and researcher support. Ben Johnson is a senior processing archivist at Baker Library, Harvard Business School, where he is perpetually processing the Polaroid Corporation records. Ben helps develop and implement procedures and workflows to better streamline the processing of collections. He also frequently finds himself working with audiovisual materials. And finally, we have Kelly Spring, who is the Access Archivist at East Carolina University, where currently she aspires to ArchivesSpace migration wizardry with a team of talented colleagues. Thank you for joining us today. Elizabeth will start us off and will hold for questions at the end.
Hi everybody. I'd like to show you a technique that we came up with a few years ago to automate the data entry of container lists in our finding aids. When we first used this technique, we were actually using a different product, WordPerfect, and then later on I created the little demo of how to do it using Excel and Word. So it should be useful no matter which product you happen to be using, even open source tools. So the first thing that you do is create your little spreadsheet with columns that you need. For instance, the normal is going to be the normalized version of the date. And then basically you take advantage of Excel's autofill features to help you with your data entry. So when you add a value to a cell, you can drag that value down as long as you need it. And Excel can also recognize patterns. So if you have an obvious pattern that you're trying to follow, you just select the 2 cells and off you go. Now for the date column, we need to get a little bit more specific. So I'm selecting the column and then going to format the cells to be specifically date. And just for fun, let's do this type of date. Say OK. And then for the normalized version of the date, we're going to do a custom field. And however you like to normalize your dates, you can decide. This is so that systems have consistency in interpreting your dates. Then the next thing you need to do is create a little rule or function for Excel. You do that by putting a plus symbol in this field and then selecting the date field after it and then hitting tab. So now that we've applied a rule to this column, we're going to drag it all the way down so that it will autofill the way we want it to. And now you just type your dates. And you can type your dates as numbers and it will automatically know to convert it back to the format that you wanted. If I hit tab, you can see that both of these dates are filled in. Now if I create a pattern, such as that, so these two dates are a month apart. That way, if you have similar date breakdowns, you can do the autofill feature and just drag it all the way down. Now all of your dates are filled in. With description, of course, that would be a unique field that you would have to type in whatever you want, but sometimes there are repeating values from folder to folder. So let's try that. So if your description includes other criteria that are not generic like this, you can add another column that has more unique information about what type of correspondence or what type of mining claims or whatever, and then just have another category in your merge data. All right, so what we want to do here is to take a copy of all of this information Normally in Excel, you can use Excel as the data source for doing a mail merge operation, but if you do that, then you lose the formatting that you've carefully put in for your date fields. So we're going to check it out a little bit. Instead, paste the table in a Word document, and then we're going to save this as the data source. Okay. The next thing you want to do is create a little template, or if you already have a template of your EAD data. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. When you type your XML into Word, you need to be very careful that the little quote marks are using ordinary quotes and not curly quotes, because XML chokes on special characters. So just word to the wise. And this is a file you just save all the time, and then when you want to use it, copy it into a new document. Then from here, we need to use the mail merge program. So when it says select recipients, that's where it's asking you for what type of data source you're using. We'll pick the data source we just created. And make sure your cursor is in the place where you want it, and now you can do your insert merge fields. Okay, now we just need to finish the merge. Want to edit your document when it's all done. Now it has data in it, and it creates section breaks between each of these XML segments. So you want to delete those, and it's a special character, so you're trying to find the section break, and then replace all. So now you have all of your XML that you can paste into your finding aid. That's all I have to show you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, we can hold that for the end, but feel free to start entering that into the chat box. Jason?
Hi, so I'll be talking about tools named Stead and Steady for converting spreadsheets into EAD. I'm Jason Ronallo, the Department Head of Digital Library Initiative at NCSU Libraries. I'm the former Digital Technology Development Librarian. I built a lot of the NCSU Library's special collections technical infrastructure, and I used to have a lot more to do with collection guides and EAD XML. It's been many years since I've done this work, so I hope I'm getting all my facts straight in this presentation today. Please excuse me if I get any of my archival or EAD terminology incorrect, since it's been a while. And here's my contact information. Should you try out these tools, want to get in touch for anything. Also, you can get the slides here, and the link will also be at the bottom of every slide. And if someone wants to paste that link into the chat too, that'd be great. If you press P, you can get speaker notes, what I'll be saying. In short, Steady takes a CSV file and outputs EAD XML, and that's it really. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why spreadsheets. We have an archives information management system. It was previously Archivist Toolkit. Now we're using ArchivesSpace. So why use spreadsheets at all instead of entering things directly in that system? And so I want to start about talking about some of the use cases. We've had donors who gave us spreadsheets and be able to munge those into container lists. We have a case where we've had poor Wi-Fi coverage in offsite storage locations. So as someone's working within the stacks, it can be difficult to get access to the network. And so being able to work offline has been helpful in some cases. And, you know, as you just saw, you can do things like find and replace, use familiar tools, that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's lots of other reasons. So a little bit of history for us. We were initially using Archivist Toolkit. Development of the tools that I'm going to be talking about started in 2010. It started as an internal tool, but I decided just to put it up public in case anyone else might make use of it. Advertised it a little, and I was happy to see that it got not insignificant use by lots of institutions across the U.S. and has been for several years now. The tool comes in two parts. The first is Stead, and here's the link to the Git repository for the code. Stead stands for Spreadsheets-to-EAD. In order to use it, though, it requires converting to CSV format. The CSV is the input that gets converted to EAD XML. And under the hood, it's a Ruby library distributed as a Ruby gem. Included with that is a command line tool. So let's take a really quick look at that. If you have Ruby installed, installing Stead is easy. Just gem install Stead. And installing that gives you a command, CSV to EAD. If you run CSV to EAD -- help, you get all of the command line options. In the simple case, though, you can just give it the path to a CSV file. So let's take a very simple example and do that. If you want to grab the sample CSV file that I'm talking about, I'll be using this one in the demonstration, and you can get it here. You can see that it's got a header row and then 5 rows of data. Here's the command we run and the output from that command. So we just run CSV-to-EAD --CSV with the full path to the CSV file that we have. So I'm only showing the top of the output here, even though this example is rather short. This pretty formatted XML goes on quite a bit longer. Okay, so usually how you're creating the CSV file is in Excel or some other tool that creates spreadsheets, and then you export it as CSV. Here's a little snippet here. There's more columns, but that's as many rows as we have in our sample. But what we can see even from this example is that each line represents a file. We can see here that there are 3 series, and that series 2 has 2 subseries. Subseries is optional, and series and subseries information has to be repeated on each line. So you can use some of the tricks that you just saw to accomplish that. And it's really just series and subseries and files, and that's it. There's no further depth or nesting allowed than just series, optionally subseries, and then file level. And here's a snippet of the XML that gets created for a component. This is for the last line of that CSV file, which is series 3, which has a single file within it. So this example is very simple, but you can include more at the CO2 file level if you need to. And here's the complete CSV schema. These are the columns that you can have in your CSV file which apply to each file row. I'm not going to go over how each of these is applied to the XML. Best way to find out is to run the sample CSV file through and see where that information gets placed in the XML. Okay, and one way you can do that is through the online application Steady, which is really just a thin web application wrapper around the Stead Ruby library. Here's the link to the public instance and to the Git repository. It's hosted on a free version of Heroku. If you visit the public instance, you'll see the application looks like this, and off to the right is a bit of about information with some use cases, and further down is a link to the code and contact information, that sort of thing. So this is the main part of the form that you have to fill out. Just a few required fields. Names included, so I can help someone easier. Email can be useful for contacting users. I like to see the organization, so I can feel good about how many different institutions are making use of the tool. So encouragement for myself. And you can see that I've already used the file input there to select the CSV file to upload, which is the same sample example that I showed before. If you click the Upload and Process button, then you'll see this message. Please wait for and accept the download of the EAD XML. Once this one completes, just change the file to process another. So all the 4 fields stay filled out in between runs, and so there's no need to fill out all the fields again if you're processing a lot of CSV files. And this can come in handy as there are sometimes issues which mean the same collection CSV needs to be run through again. And then your browser will prompt you to open and save the file. By default, it creates just some simple EAD XML output that was fine for Archivist Toolkit and other uses at the time. But when we started to use ArchivesSpace, we discovered that to import EAD XML, it required some additional data in the Arch desk and some additional identifiers. So if you scroll down the form a little bit further, you'll see this section, and you'll see that I've filled it in. And if you want to be able to import your EAD XML into ArchivesSpace, this is the minimal set of things that's besides the file, the series, subseries, file level component parts that you'll need in order to have a good import. So here's an example of the highlighted data which must be included in this section. So in this case, it's obviously poor dummy data, but you can see how it gets mapped into the EAD XML well enough. I could have added dummy data that ArchivesSpace would have accepted, but it seems better to allow a user to include that top level information explicitly in order for it to work. Later on, added those fields to the form so that a user could input that information. Also, for ArchivesSpace to accept an EAD XML import correctly, the containers need to have identifiers, and the parent-child relationship needs to be made explicit. So here's a case where a box has an identifier, and the child container refers to the parent. And those are just dummy identifiers that are made up on the fly. So over the years, some folks have reached out to me when they've encountered issues. And some of the common issues that people have encountered have included these. The XML requires the characters all be UTF-8 encoding, or it'll fail to create the EAD XML if it encounters non-UTF-8 characters in the CSV. This can happen if either non-UTF-8 characters get pasted in, or the settings on the spreadsheet tool aren't set correctly for UTF-8. There's a whole class of issues around malformed CSV, including things like mismatched quotation marks, commas, empty columns and rows at the end of the document, that sort of thing. And I think a common issue is a confusion about how series work, which leads to some limitations of the tool. There are a number of limitations. In order for a series and subseries to work with the nesting, the exact same information needs to be repeated in each file or row, and it needs to be repeated exactly. Rows are files, so other data has to be added outside of the tool through the web application, and the command line tool allow the ability to add certain required fields, but there's lots else that you could include that the tool doesn't help you with. There's limited nesting, so as you see, it's only series, subseries file. It only goes down to C3, and then delete poor error messages, so it doesn't always help you to identify what the issue is with your CSV files. And really, it's only useful, I think, for initial imports only. It can't be used to update or manage a guide, so it's only for that initial import stage. And probably the greatest limitation is that it doesn't use the ArchivesSpace API. and instead relies on importing EAD XML. The web application has an unsteady future, I should say. Since we're now using ArchivesSpace and seeing new, more direct tools being developed, I'm really uncertain about maintaining the web application going forward. It seems to have limited usefulness if there's being developed more robust community-supported tools. And I'm told that though the current ArchivesSpace tools still don't do everything as my colleagues here at NCC Libraries would like, so they still do use Steady on occasion. Further, I don't really do much archives work anymore. We now have Trevor Thornton, who's involved with ArchivesSpace technical teams, who does most of our work in that area. His code hasn't been updated in 3 years. It runs on the free version of Heroku. I think when it fails to run anymore, I'm unlikely to attempt to bring it back online. But I will say the web application and command line tool will continue to be available as open source, though, if that's still of use. So I'll say it's kind of funny to be presenting about this tool after having supported it for 8 years and it possibly being near its end of life. But there it is. Okay, so that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason. And I still think it's useful to have all of this background so that we could think about the future and have conversations around it. So I really appreciate your presentation. Next, we have Ben.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can all hear me. As Christine said, I'm Ben Johnson from Baker Library, Harvard Business School. I'll be demonstrating our workflow for importing bulk archival objects using a spreadsheet import plugin built by Bobbi Fox of our Library Technology Services Group. The link to the GitHub site for the plugin and related information is in the webinar email announcement, but I can also drop it in the chat if that's helpful after I'm done. So first, why do we create this plugin? Archivists at Harvard needed a way to import a large number of archival objects along with their associated top containers, creator agents, subjects, digital objects, and etc. To a target resource record already defined in ArchivesSpace quickly and efficiently. Data within spreadsheets can be easily migrated, and we create accession inventories using spreadsheets, so it was a natural way for us to go. The plugin allows archivists to import as few as one archival object or somewhere north of, I think, from 4,000 in either simple or complex hierarchy. I haven't tried to max this out yet with a test case, but we have imported fairly large and complex spreadsheets without any difficulty. The complex hierarchies can contain children and even grandchildren. So jumping right in, sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen. This is a spreadsheet template with some data populated already. The columns map data to existing fields in ASpace, and as long as you don't delete or edit the row marked ArchivesSpace field code, which is this row, as you can see here are the ASpace you can delete, hide, or rearrange columns to suit your workflow. Since there are lots of fields in ASpace and lots of columns in this spreadsheet, that functionality is extremely helpful. The columns are divided into groups and are color-coded. I'm not sure if you can see the color coding. So the first group is basic information, which runs there. We have dates, extent information, container information, visual objects, agents. Again, this is a very long spreadsheet. Subjects and notes. So hiding columns or rearranging them to your workflow is extremely helpful. There are required columns. So the EAD ID is a required column. Title of your archival object, your hierarchical relationship, and I'll talk more about this later because this can be confusing, and your description level. There are some columns that have pre-populated defined drop-down data from a controlled vocabulary list. So for instance, here's one, and date type is another. So now back to ASpace, I have an example resource in our QA instance at Harvard here. So the first example of importing archival objects I'm going to show is for a simple or flat run. So I'm going to use that spreadsheet. Sorry to jump back and forth. I'm going to use this spreadsheet with these archival objects that we received. So this is, we'll just say that this is, we received an addition to an existing collection, and we created this inventory. And the inventory can be inserted anywhere in your existing finding aid. So let's say we want to just drop it somewhere in here. Let's drop it here. We'll drop it whatever you select. The imported archival objects fall after that archival object that you selected. We're going to click on Load via Spreadsheet, select our file, and then we're going to import from the spreadsheet. So you need to wait for ASpace to ingest the data, and the wait time really depends on how much data is in your spreadsheet. If it's a large spreadsheet, it can take anywhere up to 30 seconds or so. This one was pretty small, so it says that it's been processed. We've created a top container, and it gives you this load manifest, if you will, and you can copy that to a clipboard. We do a lot of times. And if there are errors within your import, you can go back and reference this later while working in ASpace, and I'll show you an error in a little bit. So we've imported all of these. Let's see where they are. They came after lawyers. And there they are. Top container was created. So box 4, folders 9 through 16. So that was a simple example of a simple inventory. So if you'd like to do something a little more complex, we can do that. I say complex because it has more than one level. So it will have this is say an additional materials we just received that it turns out to be a standalone series. So we created an inventory for it, and we're going to import a parent, which will be the series level, and then the archival objects, which will be the children. So we're going to use the same steps as the simple. Click on the archival object you want the material to fall after. In this case, we want it to fall after this series. And this might take a little longer again because it's a larger spreadsheet. I can show you that while we wait. So this one is probably 35 archival objects in it. It's been processed. New top container was created here. Looks like it came in okay. So there it is. So again, a couple of things to be aware about when you're importing data into ArchivesSpace. Provided that you've populated the 4 required columns that I mentioned before, the spreadsheet will import archival objects into ASpace even if some of your data is incorrect. So I'm going to show you an example of that. We're going to start here, just so you can. So this is an error, which I've set it up as an error, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So this is the same spreadsheet as I used for the simple import. but I've misspelled my container information here, my container type. So that's a box on a box, and we're going to see what happens. So the file has been processed, but you get a lot of error messages here. The best thing to do is to copy this to a clipboard, and then paste it in here. So you'll know where they are. These are your ref IDs. You can find them easily if it's a large finding aid, so you don't have to go searching for them. So it has imported all of these archival objects, but it has dropped all of the container instances, which is not great because that's a lot of data cleanup because you have to manually enter or create container instances for those. So a major takeaway with that is that you can capitalize on all the power of Excel, dragging and dropping and copying and pasting, but before you import your spreadsheet, make sure that you double and triple check your data because it can cause a headache. So back to the hierarchical relationship that I mentioned before. So as you can see, there's two different numbers here, 1 and 2, 1 being the series level, 2 being the file level. So the hierarchical relationship refers to where in ArchivesSpace you have chosen to import the archival object or objects. So 1 would indicate a sibling of the selected archival object, or the top level archival object in a resource that does not have any. And 2 would indicate a child. So if we were back in ArchivesSpace, if I wanted to import a series, it would be a 1 here. But if I was importing just archival objects here, it would also be a 1 because these are, if I imported archival objects here, it would be a sibling. If I imported archival objects up here, it would be a sibling. So our hierarchical relationship is tricky and hard to sort of, grab, but the more you play with this import spreadsheet, the easier it becomes, and the more adept you'll be at it. I will say this tool has been extremely helpful to us in our workflow. We're in the middle of a retrospective finding aid project at Baker to convert Word documents and PDFs to resource records, and over the past year we've created and imported over 150 new resources using this tool, and that would not have been possible if we didn't have it. So that's all I've got. If you guys have any other questions or would like to see very complex examples, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can email you spreadsheets that we've done. That's it for me.
Thanks, Ben. And it looks like a couple of questions came in for you. The first one seems like an easier one to address is, Ben, did you say you can delete unused columns?
Did I say you can?
Awesome. I think that answers Vivian Lee's question. The other question looks like it might be a bigger conversation, but with your experience, would you say that using the Harvard spreadsheet might be a better solution for Joan, who's a lone arranger at a small private college?
Yes, I would, Joan, I would say it would be a much better tool. It saves so much time and effort. But if you have any more in-depth questions, I can answer those over email. If that's better. Kate, I'm not 100% sure about the difficulty of installing the plugin. That was our LTS group, so our library technology services group, and they're coders over there. So I don't code myself.
So I'm not 100% sure, but I can put you in touch with Bobbi Fox, who was the person who installed our instance.
Yeah, and your host should be able to get the plugin turned on also.
Sounds good.
Next, we'll have Kelly.
All right, thank you. So since I'm presenting on troubleshooting, we're going to have a little background music with this, just to keep us calm. This is going to suppose that you did start with a spreadsheet and that you transformed it to EAD. And this is also going to suppose that you're relatively comfortable with XML, but if you're not, no problem, you can still follow along. So here's example number 1, and I call this one Just Another Day in the Office. So here I'm in my ArchivesSpace instance, and I am going to create a background job, and I'm going to import data. So I have a sample file that I'll grab and drag and drop here and queue the job. So ArchivesSpace is going to upload that file, and then it will start the import process. And when it's finished, you'll get this nice green box here, and we'll refresh that. But immediately I noticed that there are no new and modified records down here, and there really ought to be. So let's look at the log here, and it says no records were found in the input file. But I also know that that's not accurate. So if I think about it, I think what I probably did is forgot to select EAD from the drop-down menu, which is a silly mistake, but it's one that I make a little more often than I'd like to admit. So let's go back, and I'll show you what it looks like when it goes through successfully. Sorry, you guys can't see my drop-down menu, but here it is, EAD is selected, and I will grab that sample file again and drag and drop it, and then queue it for import. Okay, well already the log looks different, so that's a good sign. We'll refresh the page. And here are all of those new and modified records that I was looking for the first time. So each one of these entries is a component within that overall collection. They all have their own icons, but I'm searching here for the one that is the collection level, and it's this one here. And so if I click on that, it will take me to the EAD that I just imported, and I can check to make sure the data went in the way I wanted it to, etc. Okay, example 2. Running on empty. So again, this time, thankfully, I have EAD selected, and I will go and grab another file. And wait for it to run. So when it fails, you'll get a nice red box that tells you the job has failed. So I'll refresh that page, and then we can look into the messages and figure out what went wrong. So I will copy out the first part of this message and make it a little bigger so we can see it. Okay, it's saying that in the instances, there were some container requirements that ArchivesSpace didn't find. So how am I going to figure out where that was? So we can check under the hood, as I say, or open the EAD XML. So here it is in an editor, and my cursor up here in the right is showing this little green box. That just means that the EAD is valid. So that's not going to help me find the error. But that first part of the log did say container, and all of these over here on the left are files where a container might be throwing that error, but there are quite a bit of them. So I need to figure out which one is throwing the error. So we'll go back to ArchivesSpace, and I will select the second part of that error message in its entirety and make it a little easier. Well, okay, I say easier, but make it better to see. So don't worry, what we're looking for here is something that is human readable, and it's down here at the bottom, Shoe and Leather Reporter, Volume 103. So this is something that was in our spreadsheet that we can easily recognize, and we can search for that in the XML. So I've pre-searched, and here it is, Shoe and Leather Reporter. It is one of those files. And I'm going to look at the container, and it looks like that is an empty tag. There's nothing in there. And the extent is also empty. So if I strip out that one and any other ones that are throwing that error, I'm pretty sure we will no longer be running on empty, and the EAD will go in. Example 3. Leave your comments below. So again, I made sure to have EAD selected, and I have another pre-prepared sample file ready to go, and we will queue it. And again, refresh the page, and we'll start to look at this log to give us clues. So just as before, I will select this and make it a little bigger for us to be able to read. Okay, so extent, date, and title. These were required but were missing. So I'm going to go back to my XML file. Oh, no, sorry, I'll go back to ArchivesSpace first, and we'll get the second part, because before I go to the XML file, I want to figure out where I should be looking. So let's get this out of there and make it a little easier to look at. Okay, again, human readable part of the error. It's right here, finding a title, Hill test record, and the level is collections. So those are things that I can look for in my XML document. So here I am at the collection level, and I see that I have the unit ID there, but I don't have any of those other components that ArchivesSpace was looking for before we get to the series level. Now, one thing you can do to make sure all of that information is there, and one of the other presenters talked about this, is you can put in comments. And so here's a template that I have created, and it has comments to tell the user to enter your title, enter your date, and enter your extent here. So depending on what tool, what method you have used to create your EAD, putting comments in a template is quite useful and could really help prevent that error from being thrown. Example number 4, be unique. So I'll start from the beginning with this one. Again, we're going to create a background job, and we will import data. This time, yes, click EAD. Again, you can't see my drop-down menu, but here it is. And grab another sample file and drag and drop it in. And we will refresh the page and check out this log. Okay, so I think you guys can read this one pretty well. I don't think I need to make it bigger, but it's saying that that EAD or that ID is already in use, and the EAD ID must be unique. So there are several reasons why you might want to upload a document that has the same ID. Maybe you want to merge records. But no matter what you're doing, as one of the other presenters said, just make sure that your ID is unique so that it will go into ArchivesSpace. And the last example is the DAO DOE. So I will import a sample file that has a digital object in there, just in case anyone is going to use one of these spreadsheet tools to help them with the digital objects as well. And again, we'll look at the log for clues. And I will copy this one out. Okay, so I know I'm working with the digital objects, and it's telling me that the URI and the title are both missing. But again, which digital object do I want to look for? So the best parts of this are, okay, it says digital object, but then there's also an object ID in here. And I could use that to go back into the XML file, but because I'm familiar with the particular data, I know there's an easier part. So let's look at the third part of this log. And this PID 922, that's an easier identifier. So I'll go back to my XML, and I see it here. And now ArchivesSpace is looking for that DAO title as well as the URI for it. And just the way that they're constructed here at ECU, it's not that way within the finding aid, but that's okay. There are other tools that you could use that are more powerful to get your digital objects formatted and get them into ArchivesSpace. But if you really wanted to, you could take all of these that you see over here, these items, these are all digital objects, and load them into one of these spreadsheets. And then you can add that title that it's looking for. Let me scroll over here. And you can also add that URI that it's looking for. And then with a whole heck of a lot of data manipulation, you can get these things into ArchivesSpace. Now I show the sandbox here because when I tried to put it into our instance, it was causing problems. So I'll go over here and click on digital objects so that we can see what it looks like when it goes in. And what it looks like is that the sandbox has been cleared. So for that one, well, let's just recap. So some of the typical errors that you might encounter include your import type, empty tags, or a duplicate ID. You might also encounter that you're missing information or your EAD was structured differently than ArchivesSpace is looking for. And some solutions, those include some real easy fixes or just tossing your empty tags or a whole lot of data manipulation. But there's always the option to call your systems administrator for help.
All right, thank you everyone for sharing all of your different strategies to transform spreadsheets into finding aid components, as well as demonstrating how some of the most common import errors that you might face. So we'll now open up the floor for any questions or comments on spreadsheets, finding aids, importing, and anything else that's related to this webinar, or any conversations about the future of getting all this material into ArchivesSpace. Kelly, which XML editor are you using?
Oxygen.
Okay, and I see that Ben replied to Anna's question earlier about how far along in the component hierarchy you can go, and Ben has tested up to the 8th level, and it looks like it's been successful up to at least that point, maybe even beyond. Yes, please jump in, Ben, and everyone else.
So the question was the workaround for accessions. It's not the best case scenario by any means, but what we've done is for collections that we've accessioned that we don't want to be public, we want in the back end, so that's not good. So that our collection managers and the HBS archivist can search and find information is we've created, we've spawned a resource record from the accession record and populated whatever information we need in the resource record. In the title, we've put, John Smith papers unprocessed in brackets. And then for the inventory, we've created a dummy series which is basically just accession information as the title. And with that, then we've added the spreadsheet, or we've imported the spreadsheets underneath that top level series. And they're unpublished, but the thought is that when the collection is eventually processed, you can keep the resource record as is, and then just delete the series, because all of the data and all the archival objects that fall underneath that series are deleted as well. So it's kind of a workaround for a bulk edit or a bulk delete. I mean, you're going to process the series, you'll probably things will change. Obviously, the arrangement will change. So that's sort of the way we've done it. It's not the best, but it's a workaround for us.
Bill, I'm not sure if I completely understand your question. What do you mean by using something as access? Do you mean the database?
So I feel like you could use something like that. I also, at least for us, tend to see that this isn't a tool that gets used infrequently. And so, after a certain point, we're working within ArchivesSpace. So I don't know how much effort would be worth putting into something like that.
Bill, does that help answer your question? So you should be able to enter the data into either Excel or into Access. And I believe with all of these workflows, it looks like it works best if you have it in, well, with Elizabeth's example, if you paste it into Microsoft Word, or in the other examples, if you use Excel. And then from there, you can possibly have your volunteers working off those platforms. And then if someone else with online access could import this information in. Great. Any other questions related to mail merge or the Steady tool, the import plugin, or any import troubleshooting questions? The chat box seems pretty quiet, so I'm just going to give it another minute or so. The recording of this webinar will be available soon, and I'll have the slides posted on our wiki page as well. And if we have any other questions, we're happy to take it. Otherwise, we can finish a little bit early. Thank you all so much. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me and I can try to get you connected with the resources that might help. Oh, right. We do have the member forum coming up in August. It's on August 14th. The site is the Josephine Butler Park Center, which is part of the Washington Parks and People Network. And we will be meeting from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And we will be having a joint reception with Archive It over at the National Zoo. And so watch out for your emails, and I'll be posting a lot of information on the listserv as well as the blog, and I'll be tweeting about it as well, and we'll have registrations open possibly within the next week. The working group is working on setting the program up, and it's taking shape. You can feel free to take a look at it at the wiki. We completed our presentation submissions. Priority deadline was yesterday, but if you have any other ideas or if you'd like to make any suggestions, we're happy to take that in as well. And we hope to see you there on August 14th. And thank you all.